Hello and welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. My name is Alyssa and this is my review for Black Mirror Season 6. This is not a video that was on my calendar for June, but I kind of forgotten about Black Mirror and I definitely want to review it as I have reviewed previous seasons of Black Mirror going back to season 3 on my old channel of Acton Tomko. First I'm going to give my overall thoughts on season 6, and then I will get into the nitty-gritty and do very detailed spoilery reviews of each of the 5 episodes of season 6. And yes, there are 5 episodes. I had erroneously stated in my live stream that I did last week that there were 6 episodes. Somehow I miscounted. I don't know how I thought there were 6. There was actually 5. So I'm going to review each of them individually after I give my overall thoughts. And I will also put a timestamp for each individual episode review and the description below. So if you haven't seen them all and you only want to click on one episode review at a time, you may do that. Now, my overall thoughts for season 6. I freaking loved it. I thought it was an excellent season. I would put it in the upper echelon of seasons in Black Mirror. I would put it in the top half. There have been 6, obviously, so I would put it in the top 3. I would have to go back and look at the other seasons to see exactly how I'd rank them. I do recall that seasons 1 and 5 are my least favorite. I think 3 and 4 would probably be up there. I forget about 2. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch 2. I think 2 was kind of meh for me, but I don't remember. But I will also say that if season 6 had only been 3 episodes, which is interesting for me to say that because I complained about season 5 only being 3 episodes, which the first 2 seasons also were, but I thought they had moved beyond that. Season 5 was only 3 episodes and I complained, but if season 6 had only been 3 episodes, assuming that those 3 were the first 3, and we had episodes 1 through 3, I mean, that was the whole season, then I would be on here to declare that season 6 is by far, easily, hands down, the best season of Black Mirror to date. But we did get episodes 4 and 5, and while those 2 are hit or miss, one I loved, one I didn't love, which I'll tell you about later, they don't overall bring down this season to being one of the worst seasons. Obviously, it's still in the upper echelon, but I would no longer say it's hands down the easily the best season. I don't think any season is that. I think it's either 3 or 4, but I'd have to go back and rewatch them to give my clear decision on that. But the point is, I really liked season 6. And it's interesting to hear other people's opinions on all these Black Mirror episodes of the past, because opinions tend to be all over the place. People have their favorites, people have their least favorites. Some people's favorites are other people's least favorites. But there also tends to be a general feeling by the fandom. And by happenstance, my opinion of the season 6 episodes generally does fit in with the overall fandom's opinions. There's nuances and variety within those opinions, but as far as which episodes I like, which episode I didn't like, generally goes with what everyone else is saying about season 6. And I did not realize this until after I watched it. I just want you all to know that I didn't look at reviews and IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes and all of that and form my opinion after seeing those based on what other people have to say. I don't care what other people have to say as far as forming my opinion, and that's always the case whether I am with the crowd or not. So I watch the episodes on my own, formed my own independent opinion, and then went and looked and saw what other people were saying. And generally speaking, my opinion does line up with the crowd. The episode that I would say are my 2 favorite are the 2 episodes that I keep seeing kind of going back and forth as the highest rated on IMDb. It changes. Like I think they're like 0.1 rating point apart from each other. Those 2 episodes are my favorite of the season as well. And the one that I would say is my absolute favorite is the one that currently has 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm sure that will change. So I do think in general, I'm going with the crowd this time. I did not in season 5. I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but my favorite episode was Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2, which everyone hated. So I was very much against the crowd in season 5, I am more with the crowd in season 6. Not only with my favorite episodes, but with my least favorite this time, which is the same episode everyone else is hating on. And again, I didn't look and see, oh, everyone hates this, oh, I hate it too. No, I watched it independently on my own and decided, God, this episode sucks. And then saw that thankfully everyone seems to agree with me, except maybe my brother. But most other people do agree with me that that episode is really bad. And I'll tell you which one that is later. Now, Black Mirror season 6 is a departure from previous seasons, but only insofar as that it is trying something new. You can't say that Black Mirror season 6 is any one particular genre. I know people are fixated on the horror genre, but the horror genre is only 2 episodes out of the 5. So you couldn't say Black Mirror season 6 is a horror genre. Only 2 of them are. I think Black Mirror season 6 is going in a different direction, but that direction is trying new things. And I would argue that this started in season 5, continued in Bandersnatch, and it continues in season 6. Bandersnatch was definitely something different. The choose your own adventure format, definitely something new that Black Mirror was trying. Season 5, the aforementioned episode of Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2 was a drastic departure, which I think is why a lot of people are panning it. I loved it. I love that Black Mirror is trying new things. Charlie Brooker and the crew have the balls to try what they want to try. I think they're bored of the old format of just simply doing episodes that take place in our near future or in our present that are showing how humans misusing technology. I mean, that's a concept you can only take too far, and I can understand why he would get bored with it, Charlie Brooker, and want to try different things. And I feel the same thing about TV as I do about music. Musicians that I've listened to 20, 30, 40 years, they don't do the same thing now that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. They're constantly evolving. They're trying new things. And when this happens, you will inevitably have a lot of the fans being really upset. You will have a lot of fans being turned off and not wanting to listen to them anymore because they want to hear the old stuff. But then you got to understand it, as a creative artist, you get bored doing the same things for 40 years. Or in a TV show, this has been like 10, 12 years. You don't want to do the same thing over and over again. You want to try different things. And I think it's very hit or miss. Like that one episode that I'm going to talk about that I hated is very much a miss. But I love that they're trying new things. And for the most part, I think it really works. Now, let me get back to what the genres are in season 6. As I mentioned, it is not one single genre. It is just an overall, we're trying new things. And the first 2, I would say, are probably the most similar to previous seasons of Black Mirror. They're kind of getting into a little bit of that technology, how humans are misusing technology in the near future or in the present. And I think that they are that, but with a new twist, because they both seem to be focused on streaming services and taking shots at Netflix in particular, which is an interesting way to go about it. So it's kind of a slightly new direction, but the most rooted in what Black Mirror has been before. Episodes 4 and 5 is in that aforementioned horror genre, very much horror episodes. And then episode 3 is like nothing else in season 6, and it's like nothing else Black Mirror has done before. It's its own unique thing. So you can't say that, oh, season 6 is going into this one different direction. It's in at least three different directions within the season, which is different from Bandersnatch, which is different from the different directions that season 5 took. Especially with Rachel, Jack, and Ashley 2, a whole other different direction. So the theme I'm getting is Black Mirror is trying new things. So in season 7, if there is one, they will try other new things. So if you're worried about, oh no, they're doing horror all the time, are they just going to keep doing horror? No, I would say absolutely not. In fact, I heard that there was talk of a sister series called Red Mirror, and actually episode 5 was supposed to be in Red Mirror originally, but they decided not to do Red Mirror yet, and they put it in Black Mirror. But potentially we could see a Red Mirror show, which would be all the horror episodes. So I think if anything, we'll see that, but I do not expect that we'll see horror in Black Mirror itself anymore. I think we'll continue to see it try different things. Who knows what they'll do next? Maybe they'll do fantasy or something crazy. Who knows? personally, I'm here for it. I love it, although it's not 100% hit for me. It doesn't always work 100% of the time. I absolutely love that the show has evolved, that they're trying different things, but still staying within that kind of dark feel of Black Mirror. So it's not a drastic departure, but I freaking love it. So I'm here for it. Now let us go ahead and get into the episode reviews. We'll start with episode 1. And as I said before, this is spoilery. So get ready for some spoilers. And again, you can click on the timestamps below for each particular episode. Now let's get into episode 1. Okay, now we get into episode 1, full spoilers ahead. And the first episode is Joan is Awful. And as soon as this episode was done, I thought that season 6 is already better than season 5. I thought season 5 overall was pretty mediocre. And kind of, I don't know, I talked about how Black Mirror has kind of is trying new things. I thought it was very hit or miss in season 5, whereas this felt more like a Black Mirror episode, but yet simultaneously was trying new things, which I really loved. So we're still kind of basically doing the thing of we're taking a look at present day or slightly into our future and how humans are doing fucked up things with technology. Still the basic theme, but with a new twist, as this is the first episode to focus on streaming services. The second episode will be the next one after this. But and taking a shot at Netflix in particular. I mean, it's called Streamberry, but it has a big S similar to the big N, and it goes wow, and like makes the same noise. And then when they're actually browsing through it, it looks exactly like Netflix. It looks the same. So definitely a unique topic that they hadn't covered before. And so it was old and fresh at the same time, which I absolutely loved. This episode also takes a more lighthearted approach relative to other Black Mirror episodes. I wouldn't necessarily call this lighthearted. I think that there's a lot of serious things that are happening to this character. There's still that dark undertones than Black Mirror always has, but relative to other Black Mirror episodes, a little lighter, a little bit more humor injected into it. Not as dark and dreary as, say, episode 3, which I'll get to. I don't think there's any humor in there at all, but I also love that episode for different reasons. So I appreciated all of that. I absolutely loved the acting. I think Selma Hayek playing herself, she is fantastic. And Annie Murphy, who I actually hadn't heard of because I don't watch Schitt's Creek, was also very good in this episode. So well written, good comedy, good acting, good commentary as well. So it's not only looking at how streaming services like Netflix are have a complete disregard for people's lives, which I think episode 2 really gets even more specifically into than episode 1 does. But not only is it looking at that, but it's just looking at a general kind of laissez-faire attitude towards social media and streaming services, where we don't read the user agreements, and we've shown that we're willing to give up a lot of our privacy for our own entertainment. And so this episode is showing like a company, a streaming service in this case, really pushing that line, really pushing the limits on that to see how far they can go. And it's kind of scary, because I think that there probably is no end to how far a company would go. Now, this technology doesn't exist, but if it did, would a streaming service do this? Yeah, hell yeah, they would. So, I mean, there's a lot of the approach to it is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit silly, but I still think that the overall commentary, the overall topic is legitimate and very serious. And I love how they handle that topic in this episode. Now, I want to jump to the ending. because I think your mileage is probably going to vary on how you feel about that twist. And I'm going to say this about the first 2 episodes, that I love the twists in these first 2 episodes. So in this episode, before they revealed that ending, before they revealed what the twist was, I had already been thinking all throughout the episode. So if Selma Hayek, her Joan is played by Cate Blanchett. So who plays Cate Blanchett's Joan? And then who plays that person's Joan? And who plays that person's Joan? And so on and so on. I thought about this before, long before the ending, like toward the beginning. As soon as they introduced that Cate Blanchett was playing Selma Hayek's Joan, I started thinking about this, like, well, who's playing her Joan? Who's playing her Joan? It could go on for infinity. Like, it just could go on for infinity, or maybe it's a circle and it circles back around eventually to the original Joan. Who knows? But I thought about that, and then I thought, well, how do we know this is even the first Joan? Like, this could be like 10 Joans in, which it was only one level in, which I'm glad they only went 1. And when I think about it, like going like 10 or 20 or something, you're too far moved from real life at that point, and you're really deep down into that computer. And like, I think that takes away a lot. So I'm glad that it was only 1 level up, that the Joan that we're watching is just 1 level removed from the real Joan. So, but I thought that before the reveal, I thought, oh, they should do that. Like, it almost was like, how could they not? I think just because I was thinking about it personally, that I was like, well, how could they not explore this? They have to. So when they did reveal that indeed this was 1 level off the real Joan, I loved it. It was so good. I was like, I was just so satisfied that they went in that direction. Now, there's some nitpicks. I have some nitpicks about this that it's not perfect. There are a couple of minor flaws, nitpicks that don't bother me that much, but I just have to bring them to light. One is that they state that the reason why our Joan that we see, the Annie Murphy Joan, is kind of not that mean, but then the Selma Hayek Joan is a bitch. Like, so when she fires that girl, Joan that we see is the Annie Murphy Joan, is like kind of like, well, I don't want to, but I kind of have to, and I'm sorry. Whereas Selma Hayek is just a complete bitch about it. And they say, oh, well, that's because to get viewers, they have to exaggerate, which is very true. There's a lot of commentary too about dramas based off of people's real life, and how they over dramatize it, and how that hurts people in real life, that sort of thing. But they make that statement. So that would then imply that the real Joan is even nicer than Annie Murphy, because they're exaggerating with Annie Murphy. And so I don't know. I felt like our Annie Murphy one was kind of, not that bad, and that's why Selma Hayek was exaggerating it. So does that mean the real Joan was like just completely nice about it? Like, I don't know. It's a little iffy to me. Also, we see at the end that Annie Murphy, the real life version, is wearing the yellow suit that Selma Hayek is wearing, and so she is Selma Hayek. But the whole point of Selma Hayek being able to go in there is like, you're Selma fucking Hayek. She's like, I'm Selma fucking Hayek. Like, who's going to stop me from walking in there? Does Annie Murphy really have that same sway? I don't know who the fuck she is. I don't watch Schitt's Creek, so I've never heard of her before. Does she have that same star power as Selma Hayek? I'd say not. I think that if you haven't seen Schitt's Creek, as I hadn't, you wouldn't have heard of Annie Murphy. Selma Hayek, if you've never seen any of her movies, which I don't know if I have. I've never saw Frida, so I don't know. You still know who she is. She's still Selma fucking Hayek. So I think that was a little weird to me. Like, she's really have that same star power? I don't think so. But so it doesn't quite line up. But it's okay. That does not ruin that ending for me at all. I just have to point those things out because that's what I do. So, love the twist ending, love the commentary, love the acting, love everything about this episode. It's not quite a 10 for me, but I will go ahead and give my rating. So, my rating out of 10 for this particular episode is a 9. A really, really strong start to the season. Absolutely loved this episode. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this before. I'm going to give each episode its own individual review, and then at the end, I'll give an overall season rating. Or I should say, I'll give each episode its individual rating and overall, and I'll give my overall season rating at the end. Okay, so a 9 out of 10 for episode 1. Good start. Now let's move on to the second episode. All right, let's get into episode 2, which is Loch Henry. Another excellent episode. And another one that harkens back to previous Black Mirror seasons, as I do feel like Black Mirror does like to do these true crime type of episodes. This is probably the best one of them that they have done. I don't always love those true crime type of episodes that Black Mirror does, but I think this is probably the best one of those. And another one that gets into commentary on Netflix, which I will get into in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about the presentation of this episode, the pacing of this episode, how it slowly unfolds the story, and really the perfect pace. That the layers are pulled back one at a time, and in a story like this, kind of a mystery thriller like this, that I think that is the perfect way to present the story. So at first, it's just the Scottish guy and his African-American girlfriend wanting to make this boring movie about some dude who hides eggs or something like that. Then we find out about the murders that happened in that town, and how the girlfriend wants to then make that movie. And then, of course, one more layer at a time is peeled back until we get the big reveal in the end. And I think that was perfectly done. And now, as for the commentary, it really starts early in the episode when what's her name, Pia, I think, first suggests that they do this. And one of the reasons that, I mean, the main reason Davis doesn't want to do it is because, like, well, this is a very sensitive issue. I mean, I don't know, like, people have feelings about this. I don't know how I feel about it. My dad was killed indirectly as a result of this. I don't know how my mom is going to feel about this, and I don't know that the townspeople are going to welcome this. And she's like, no, it'll be fine. So already we're seeing this, the whole motivation behind a true crime documentary like this kind of doesn't really take into account the feelings of the people involved. And Pia is certainly a lot more, I don't know, I think she humanizes it a lot more than we see the Streamberry executive later, and that probably Netflix or whatever executives would humanize it in real life. But she still wants to go forward. She's still disregarding their feelings. And I think this is kind of a more minor offense than what we see later, but certainly we're already seeing it. And then when we get to the end, when the documentary is turned inside out, and now Davis is the subject instead of the filmmaker, and he's winning this award, he's got what he's always wanted, but his life is in ruins now. And you see the heartlessness of the Streamberry executive. And she literally stands right in front of him. He literally is looking at her back at the end there while she's talking to that actress, and he has no control over it. And she has no regard for how this has affected his life whatsoever. This is deep commentary into the Dahmer documentary, the Tiger King, all of those sorts of things. So I think episode 1 touches on too, but I think this goes more directly to the heart of that because it is a true crime documentary, like what Netflix does. And again, a twist that really, really worked. And I don't say that often. I feel like there's so many twists out there in the world that are just awful, and they're twists for the sake of twists. But this is the second one in a row that really actually works. So in this case, um, the way that they build up to it is brilliant. We first get Stuart's father going into the hospital and being like, no, no, no. No, you gotta not make this. Like, I have this feeling. I think I've always known. And you're like, what? What does he know? What is it building up to? And then we get Pia trapped in the house with the mom, and something's creepy about her making that shepherd's pie. It's the creepiest shepherd pie making scene I've ever seen. Like, it makes me not want to make shepherd pie for a while. I would have to make a vegetarian shepherd pie anyway, which I have done before. But that makes me not want to do that, because like that was the creepiest shepherd pie making scene you could ever have. And how she is watching the video, and you just know something is coming. You just know, like, the tension is building and you can feel it. And that reveal of her seeing Davis's mother with the mask, it was horrifying. It was creepy as fuck. It was terrifying as well, because you fear for Pia and the way that she is just absolutely terrified, and there's no way that she can hide it from Davis's mom. And really intense scene with her chasing after Pia. And your mileage may vary on this. Whether or not she actually would have killed her, I think there's a chance she wouldn't have, because lots of years have gone by, and especially with the ending where she does, like, she gives out all the evidence, like, well, I hope your film turns out well. So I don't know if she necessarily was going to kill Pia or not, but she ends up dying anyways, so it's a moot point. But a really powerful ending that was just built up to so perfectly. So this is definitely the best true crime episode of Black Mirror, and with a really powerful message about streaming services. Now, let me get into a couple of nitpicks that I have for this episode. At one point, Stuart mentions Netflix directly. How can Netflix and Streamberry exist in the same universe? I almost wonder if that was a mistake. Like, maybe they were saying Netflix at first until they thought of the name Streamberry, and then they changed the lines to Streamberry later, and they just left in Netflix by accident, because it makes no sense that Netflix would exist in this universe. Also, this is not a big deal. It's one tiny, small, meaningless scene. But I did roll my eyes at one scene toward the beginning of the episode where they did one of the world's most overused tropes, where Davis walks into the pub the first time to see Stuart there, and he goes, "You slimy bastard! I told you to never come to me again, or I would kick your ass. Oh, how are you doing, buddy? It's good to see you again." Really? Like, how many fucking times do I have to see that trope? And I feel like it's often used for, like, Scottish people and probably Irish people too, but also just anybody. Like, it's used way too much. I call it the Lando Calrissian trope, because that's probably the first time I saw it, way back in Empire Strikes Back. Lando Calrissian does the same thing to Han Solo. It's one of the most trite, overused tropes in all of television and film. And so it was disappointing to see it in a Black Mirror episode, even though if it's just one slight, little, short, minor scene, it still bothered me, but not that much, because overall it doesn't take away from the quality of the episode. Also, I was a little confused as why having murders that took place in the town drove away tourism, drove away people from the pub. First of all, how the pub survived, it was like 30 years ago. Like, why is it just now about to go under? Like, if it's always been like this. But why does that drive away tourism? but a true crime documentary about murderers in that town brings in tourism. So, I mean, it seems like, I mean, yeah, that's drawing more attention to it. But if people's reaction to knowing about murders taking place is to not go there, wouldn't that mean that people definitely wouldn't go there? Now, I think that it is, true to life that a documentary taking place in a location like that would draw people in. So I guess I'm more criticizing why people wouldn't go there in the first place. Why a murder happening there would drive people away, which seems counterintuitive to me. So, especially since at the end a murder happening does bring people in. So I don't know. Minor nitpick there as well. Let me go ahead and give my rating out of 10 for Loch Henry. Once again, I'm giving a 9 out of 10 to this episode as well. Another great episode to start off season 6. So far, we're rolling. We're doing really good. Now, let me go ahead and move on to the third episode. All right, let's get into the third episode, which is Beyond the Sea. When I first saw this title, I was like, isn't that Lost season 6 episode that everybody hated? No, that was Across the Sea. This is Beyond the Sea, which I guess is named after the song that is played throughout this episode, which I guess there's also a movie that's named that. So this has kind of been like a trendy song to be in episodes of movies, which I wasn't aware of. But this is an extremely unique episode with an extremely unique concept. So first, having this ship that's going on this long-term mission and having the astronauts being able to still be with their families on Earth because there are these replicas that's from Next Generation, Star Trek: The Next Generation episode Allegiance. Replicas. Anytime I hear the word replica, I always think of that. Anyway, so they have these replicas, these machines, these androids back on Earth, that their consciousness can go back and forth between the replicas on Earth and their bodies out in the spaceship. That is a really interesting concept, and I am not into space-based sci-fi enough to know whether or not that has been done before. I'm sure it has been. I'm sure it's not completely original, but I love it. I think it's a really interesting concept. Now, they also set this in an alternate 1969, which I love, because I don't know. I feel like if they set it in the future, then I don't know. I've talked about in other videos that I've done how I'm like kind of not actually a fan of space-based sci-fi outside of Star Trek. So I feel like, like the 2001 thing. I don't know. You get into this drab, boring, mundane. Oh, we're in the future and we're in cryogenic sleep and like that kind of thing. I just find extremely boring and uninteresting. So to me, to set it in an alternate 1969, where they just clearly by the 60s have more advanced technology than we do in our universe, I have no problem with that. I think that makes total sense. I kind of find that a little more interesting, and also it kind of grounds us more in a setting that we're familiar with by having this set in the past. Whereas if it's set in the future, then you have to do a lot more world building to describe what the world is like in the future. Whereas the world building is already built in. It's in the 60s, same as our 60s, except they have more technology. So I think that makes it more straightforward. And so I love the choice there. Now, it's a unique setting, a unique premise, but then because it's Black Mirror, it has to explore the darkest possible side of this premise. So we have these astronauts who are going back and forth between their replicas and their own bodies. What if something tragic happens? What if people are murdered? What if somebody's family is murdered, their body destroyed? And let's do that because it's Black Mirror. So we're gonna jump into like what could be the darkest thing that could happen, the really fucked up thing that could happen, and how do our characters react from that. And that is absolutely fascinating, brilliant concept. And then Aaron Paul's character Cliff is put into this tough situation where he is now with this person who is suicidal, who is unable to do his job, and he depends on him for his life. So they're trying to figure out what can we do to help this guy, and they come up with the idea of having him borrow his link so that he can go into the Aaron Paul replica back on Earth. And I have to just say, if you don't already know that Aaron Paul is an amazing actor, then you must know after watching this, right? If Breaking Bad didn't convince you, that movie, what was it called? El Camino, if that didn't convince you, if Westworld seasons 3 and 4 didn't convince you, I think in season 4 of Westworld, too bad nobody watched it, but I think he put on a masterclass of acting in season 4 of Westworld, and he puts on a masterclass of acting here as he has to play 2 different characters, and it's very easy to tell immediately which character he's playing, and he has to play a wide range of emotions from both of these characters. Aaron Paul is so good. Anyone who thinks Aaron Paul is not a good actor just doesn't know. Like he is so amazing. So really unique, really incredible concept, really amazing acting. And I don't know. I've heard other people complain that the story drags. I didn't feel that way. I don't know. I was into it. Like I was really interested in all the family dynamics. I was interested in every single second of it. I didn't feel like it dragged at all, but maybe that's just me. Now I got to talk about the ending. Because I already know that my brother and I strongly disagree on the ending. And I do think, here's the thing, it's an ambiguous ending. And I think ambiguous endings are always going to be divisive. I think people are going to have mixed feelings on them. And there's different types of ambiguous endings. There's the one that episode 5 has that I'll get to later, which is a classic one. It was the same ambiguous ending in The Leftovers, where you don't know if the character is crazy or did the thing really happen. There's that kind of ambiguous ending. There's also the ambiguous ending, like in the episode or the show Katla that nobody else watched but me from a couple of years ago. And it's a boring show until you get to the ending. The ending is so good because it uses the ambiguous ending to perfection. And then this type of ambiguous ending where the scene cuts off, goes to credits before you get to see what happens. So what happens is up for interpretation. When an ambiguous ending is done well, it makes you think, it makes you discuss, it makes you debate, it makes you talk about the possibilities. What if this happened? What if that happened? No, I think that this happened. No, I think that that happened. And anything that brings up discussion, brings up debate, makes you think, gets the wheels rolling in your head is really good. Now, ambiguous endings can fail, and ambiguous endings can feel abrupt, especially these types of ambiguous ending where it just kind of cuts the credits, and you can kind of feel robbed that you didn't get to see how it actually ends. And I think that different people are going to interpret those endings in different ways. From what I can see, a lot of people do agree with me. I was like, heavy spoilers as an example on that channel. He said that ending is going to stick with him for years and years and years. And I agree. I think it's such a powerful ending. It is such a powerful way to end the episode, to have Dave just pull out the chair, cut the credits. It's like you don't know what he's going to do, because there's so many different possibilities. And I love that it ended there. I absolutely loved it because there's so much room for discussion. So the way I see it, Cliff had three possible choices here that he. Now, most people only talk about two. I think that's a false dichotomy. There is a third choice that no one is talking about, and I think the third choice actually would have been the best ending that they could possibly do. But first choice is he sits in that chair. He realizes that he's going to have to live with the person who murdered his wife and kid, because he's got to complete this mission, and he's going to have to suck it up and do it. Now, in order for this ending to occur, I probably would want to know what the mission is and why it's so important. We don't get that. Is humanity in danger of extinction? Are they trying to go find another planet? Is this like the, does humanity depend on it? Is this mission really, really important? So I would need to know how important this mission actually is in order for me to buy that ending, but I could be sold on that ending if they decided to do that, but they would have to add in something about the mission. The other option is that Cliff attempts to murder Dave. And I say attempt because I've heard other people saying, well, he should just murder Dave. Like Dave's just going to sit there and let himself be murdered. Like he's not. If he attempted to murder Dave, there is going to be a struggle. And I gotta say, based on everything established about the characters, Dave seems faster, stronger, and smarter than Cliff. I think Dave wins that struggle. I don't think Cliff could murder Dave. So I don't know why people talk about it as if, oh, he should just murder Dave. Like Dave is just going to sit there and let himself be murdered. No, he's going to struggle and he's going to win. So, or at least I think that's the most likely outcome. If there was an ending where Cliff murdered him, I would have a hard time buying it. I don't know. Like, I think Dave would easily kick his ass. So they could attempt to murder. You could have a possible ending there where Cliff attempts to murder him and cries and, like, oh, no, and realizing that he can't do it. And now he's forced to face the fact that he's going to have to live with this guy. And now we're back around to the other ending, really. He's going to have to live with this guy who murdered his family. Also, I should add, he can't go back to Earth. That's off the table because assuming the replica isn't decommissioned, I mean, they might have assumed that the machine had some kind of malfunction and they just like take it offline. But assuming that's not the case, as soon as he wakes up, he's in prison. Like they might even just transfer the replica to prison immediately. So if he comes back, he's in prison. Like they're going to assume he killed him. So yeah, he has no wife and kid, so he has no reason to go back there anyways. So he's stuck for I don't know how long, the rest of their lives, with the man who murdered his wife and kid. And so he's in that situation either way, actually, the way that I look at it. So I don't know that you necessarily need it. It would feel extraneous if they did any of this. Like, it would feel like I didn't need that. Like, I loved that they ended where they ended. Now, the third ending that no one else is considering, that if they did do, I think it actually would be the best ending. And I think it's the ending that no one would have seen coming. And I know no one would have seen it coming because no one's talking about it. Why hasn't anyone else thought of this? I think it would be brilliantly dark. And I think it would be brilliant. And that is Cliff could kill himself, thereby condemning Dave to death as well. A slow, long, painful death that he can do nothing to prevent. Unless Dave, of course, then took the Cliff route and also killed himself, which he could do. But I think him, like, he's got nothing to live for. His wife and kid are gone. So I could see that he would want to kill himself, but he would also calculate it that, oh, this is going to fuck Dave now. Like now Dave is fucked. So I actually think that would be the best ending, because it would be super dark, but super appropriate for Black Mirror. So that would be the one unambiguous ending that I would have accepted. Otherwise, I feel like, I don't know, it's too much. Like they're spelling things out for me too much. Whereas I loved the ambiguity and the discussion rather than having things spelled out for me. But if they did the suicide thing, that would be like, whoa, that would be so good. But super dark though. I was kind of glad they didn't go there, because that might be a little bit too dark. So anyways, that is all my feelings on all of that. I want to go ahead and give my rating for my favorite episode of this season. I want to say it's one of my favorite episodes in the series. It can't be the favorite episode because it is so vastly different from other Black Mirror episodes that if I'm going to pick one favorite, it's going to have to be one that would be more typical of a Black Mirror episode. But I so love this one. So my rating out of 10 for Beyond the Sea is a 10, the absolute best episode of the season. One of my favorite episodes of the entire series. Love, love, love everything about this episode. All right, now we can go ahead and move on to episode 4, one that I don't love nearly as much. Okay, let's get into episode 4. Mazey Day. Now, if you have not already guessed, this is my least favorite episode of the season. I go right along with everybody else. And again, I formed this opinion independent of anyone else. I watched this episode and thought, my God, this episode is a piece of shit. And then thankfully, most people do agree with me on this. I feel vindicated because it's not just me who's watched this. I'm like, God, this episode is awful. Now, it is not just because of the werewolf twist. It's not like I thought this was a great episode and then the werewolf twist ruined it. I think the werewolf twist was the jump the shark moment. It definitely put it over the edge as being one of the worst episodes in Black Mirror. Not the worst. I think the pig fucking episode still takes that title, but it is among the worst episodes of Black Mirror. And I think the werewolf twist definitely put it over the top to make it that, rather than just an ordinary below average episode that it was before this. But this, make no mistake, this episode was not good before we even got to the awful werewolf twist, which the werewolf twist, let me just get this out of the way now, completely out of nowhere, had nothing to do with anything. It was nonsensical. It was idiotic, ridiculous, all of whatever other adjectives you want to throw at it. It was all of those things. But the story was extremely problematic before we even get to that point. My main problem with this episode is I don't know what the fuck story it's telling, and it doesn't know what story it's telling. So a lot of people seem to be taking this as a commentary against the paparazzi. And the one interesting aspect of this episode is the character of Bo and how she has a conscience and she's a paparazzi who, gets out of it once she realizes that she indirectly caused, or maybe even directly caused, someone to kill himself. So that aspect is the only interesting aspect of this episode. But is that what this episode is about? On Netflix, if you look at the description of this episode, I'm going to read this to you. A troubled Hollywood starlet goes to great lengths to escape packs of invasive paparazzi as she deals with the aftermath of a hit and run. You read that, who's the main character? It sounds like Mazey Day is the main character, doesn't it? But I think at times it seems like Bo is supposed to be the main character. A lot of people are taking it as Bo is the main character, and this is about the paparazzi. Is it about the paparazzi, or is it about a starlet who is involved in a hit and run? I didn't know what the fuck story this is telling. I don't think it knew what story it was telling. It is all over the place, even before it gets to the nonsensical werewolf out of nowhere ridiculousness. Even before that, this episode's all over the place. And then once we get into the werewolf stuff, this episode is an absolute disaster, a total mess. I don't know what story I'm supposed to be following here. Is it about this member of the paparazzi who has a conscience? Is it about a Hollywood starlet who is involved in a hit and run that makes her really guilty? And I don't get the hit and run and werewolf connection. Does she then turn into a werewolf and eat the person? I didn't get that. But even before the werewolf stuff, if you want to tell a story about a Hollywood starlet involved in a hit and run and how that affects her, tell that story. The hit and run thing has been done before, but I think Black Mirror could put its own Black Mirror twist on it. And forget the paparazzi, just tell that story. Or forget about the hit and run thing and just tell the story of the paparazzi and do that in your own Black Mirror way. And just focus on that. Forget the werewolf bullshit. And just tell the paparazzi story and not focus on Mazey Day at all. And don't write a description that makes it sound like she's the main character when I don't think anyone took her as the main character. I think most people took Bo as the main character. So an absolute mess of an episode. They're just throwing shit out there and they don't know what the hell they're doing with this episode. If not for the big fucking episode, I think this is the worst in Netflix, or in Black Mirror, I should say. Maybe in all of Netflix. No, that's not true at all. But within Black Mirror, an absolute travesty of an episode. So I'm going to go ahead and give my rating because I don't feel like talking about this crap anymore. American Werewolf in crappy town. So I'm going to be a little bit generous and give this a 3. So I think the character of Bo was interesting. The character of Mazey Day is interesting. Is that they decided to focus on one or the other would have been better. But because they did have some interesting character development, I will avoid the one or the two. So I'll go ahead and give this a very generous 3 for this complete dumpster fire of an episode. So now I'm done talking about this one. Let us move on to the 5th and final episode of the season. Okay, let's get into the final episode of the season, which is episode 5, Demon 79. So now we are back very firmly into the horror genre, like episode 4. But at least episode 5 has a plot that makes sense. And you know who the main character is. So I am not totally against the horror genre. I don't want to see it in Black Mirror again, but as I said, I don't think we will. I think we will either see this Red Mirror show or we just won't see any more horror episodes at all. But I enjoy that Black Mirror is doing different things, as I talked about at the beginning. So would horror be my first choice? No, but I went along for the ride and I got a lot of enjoyment out of this episode. This is another one that is oddly lighthearted for a very dark episode, and I think we have the most lovable mass murderer that we've ever seen. It is a character that you can very much empathize with. She is a person of color living in England, surrounded by racism, and particularly from India. I think if you're an Indian from India in England, there's that whole imperialist history of England and India. So I feel like if you're someone from India living in England at this time, maybe even today, I don't know, but at this time especially, you're going to go through a lot of racism. So it's a character that we can relate to. It's a character that basically seems like a good person, even if she does fantasize about killing people, which, by the way, I did take those as fantasies when she is, picturing herself like murdering her coworker, and then the other dude who she does end up murdering later. I've heard people refer to them as hallucinations, like she's crazy I didn't take them as hallucinations. I took them as fantasy. And I think that's because we have seen this kind of thing in other shows and films. I can't think of any specific examples, but I've definitely seen this before where somebody pictures themselves beating somebody up or killing them. And usually it's not a hallucination, but a fantasy. Anyways, she does have those. So we know she has a dark side to her, but it's still a character that we definitely relate to, which makes this episode more interesting. I don't think I'd be into it if I didn't care about the main character. And a lot of fun elements to it by having the demon just being this kind of slap. It's like, oh well, you know, I'm new to demon school. It's like, which I found quite entertaining. And the fact that he takes the form of the dude who was it Bonin M or something. I actually know that song, unfortunately. The rah rah Rasputin. Long story. It has to do with my students in school. I don't feel like getting into the whole story, but I am all too familiar with that song and I hate it. But that's why my demon would look like Barry Gibb. No, I don't actually have a crush on Barry Gibb, just to be clear. This is completely for humor. I was just trying to think of another 70s icon. I mean, if you're going to go 70s icon, go all in. Go for the Bee Gees. But I enjoyed that aspect of it. I found this episode to be at times also really intense. Like I had to pause a little bit because it was like too much. Like, and this is true of episode 2 as well. When it got really intense, I'm like, oh, this is too much for me. So, particularly the scenes when she's about to murder somebody, I'm like, oh no, she's gonna do it. So it was a mix of a lightheartedness with very dark undertones because this is a demon. We're talking about the apocalypse. We are talking about racism. The politician guy there is part of the unofficially part of the National Front. So the National Front is like a third party, basically. It's extremely racist, openly racist, but has no chance of actually winning anything. So he's a part of the Tories, the Conservative Party, but then he tells the girl at the shoe store, you know what I really stand for. So he's telling her, I'm a racist fucker too. And she's like, okay, well, I can vote for you. So we have those elements in there. And so you kind of want her to kill him. I mean, I did. Like, just kill the racist bastard. Like, and prevent all those horrible things that he does. And I love how the demon was like, well, my boss is kind of like him. I mean, technically, it's within the rules, but they won't love that. So yeah, I enjoyed a lot of this episode, even if it was within the genre that would not necessarily be my first choice for a Black Mirror episode. I was into it. Now, this one also kind of has, it could be viewed as an ambiguous ending. To me, I find it pretty straightforward. I think that what happened. I don't think that this was in her head or anything like that. And the reason why I say that is because, for one thing, we see the point of view of the cops at the end. So are we saying that she is projecting herself into their point of view as part of her hallucination? I don't know. I mean, they try to give you hints that maybe she could be, this all could be in her head because they mentioned, oh, her mom had psychiatric problems. But I think that's really it. I think there's just a lot of evidence that we're to take this at face value, and I take it at face value that this happened. Now, what about all the tie-ins to other episodes? So Michael Smart is apparently the inventor of those dog things that we see in season 4 of Black Mirror. And actually, I only know this because I watch other nerdy YouTube videos, but that's actually referenced, I think, back in episode 2 when they do all these newspaper clippings that they reference Michael Smart and they reference the dog things. Michael Smart is actually referenced a lot in newspaper clippings in Loch Henry. He's also, there's a documentary about him, and there's also a documentary about Michael Callow, who's a pig fucking dude, on the Streamberry screen in episode 1. So there's a tie-in to one of the things that she's trying to watch is the Sanctuary of the Sea or something like that, and it turns out that that's the dude from episode 4 who Bo turns in at the beginning, who ends up killing himself. That they say he stars in the Sanctuary of the Sea. So there's a lot of tie-ins. So how could all of these tie-ins be if the world ends in 1979? To me, simple. In the same universe, alternate timeline. We've already seen an alternate universe in episode 3. Why could this not be just an alternate timeline? So in this timeline, the world ends, and the other timeline, Michael Smart goes on to do all the horrible things that we see him do and invent the dogs, and then that's tied into the other episodes. So why not? Why can't this be an alternate timeline? That's my simple explanation for that. I just think we're meant to take this at face value. However, if you want to interpret it as being in her head, you may go ahead and do that. I cannot stop you. I mean, I think it's a valid interpretation of that ending. Now, let me go ahead and give my rating for this episode. So I'm going to go ahead and give this an 8. So I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it, and it was really intense at times. Wouldn't have been my first choice of genre. And it does get a bit silly at times too. So it's not a 9 or a 10, but solid enough to be a good solid 8 out of 10 for me. All right, let me go ahead and wrap up this review with my overall rating for this season. So my rating for Black Mirror season 6 overall is a 9. Now, if you're wondering, like, well, how would I come to a 9 even though I gave one episode a 3? So if you're thinking, well, you know, I would just take the average rating for each episode and go with that, then this would actually, I think, end up at like a 7.8, which I would round up to an 8. So if I were to do that, then I would give this an 8, but it don't work like that. So that's not how this works. For me, within an anthology series, I expect that at least one episode will be a dud. Any anthology series that I can think of, this has been the case. The Star Wars ones that have been out, Star Wars Visions, Star Wars Tales of the Jedi. There's also Love, Death, and Robots. I actually love Death and Robots. I think multiple episodes are duds. And previous seasons of Black Mirror. Any anthology season, there is always at least one that I personally consider to be a dud, and I cannot subtract from the overall rating of the season just because of one bad episode. I'll grant any season of anthology TV one bad episode. So it's allowed to have one bad episode and still get a 9 because the first 2 were 9s. The third one was a 10, and then the other one was an 8. Strong episodes. I love that Black Mirror is trying different things. I know it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's not always my cup of tea, but I love that they're trying new things, and I think for the most part, it really pays off in this season. As I said at the top, one of my favorite seasons of Black Mirror. And with a 9 out of 10, this currently puts this as my #1 show of 2023. I'm keeping track as I go. I've only watched 7 shows so far, which is much fewer than I would have watched at this point last year. And last year, almost my entire top 10 by the end of the year were 9s. And this year, this is the first 9 I've given. So I've given a lot of 7s and 8s. Nothing's been really bad yet. But most of the shows that I've watched, I'm giving 7 and 8s to. So this is the first 9 I've given, which makes it right now my #1 show of 2023, but I'm sure it'll be overthrown. I have high hopes for Strange New Worlds season 2, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that does it for my review for Black Mirror Season 6. Thank you for sticking with me for this whole time, if that is indeed what you did. And please check out all of my Star Trek reviews, all of my videos about my transition, everything else that I do on this channel. And you can do that by subscribing and then clicking the bell for notifications. Okay, everybody, I will see you really soon. Goodbye.